This is the duality of Gein. You know, part of it was a desire to have the physical presence of his mother back with him in that home, whereas obviously another part of the motivation had to do with desecrating the corpse.
Reporter Dick Leonard remembers sitting next to Gein as the sanity hearing drew to a close. At that moment, he says, he caught a glimpse of the scared, sick man behind the monster.
I looked at Ed, and he looked at me, and I could see he was nervous. He was fearful. And he says to me, "What are they going to do to me? What are they going to do to me?" So the judge raps everybody to be quiet. And I had my hand down on the bench here, and he's next to me. And he reaches over and grabs my hand like I was his mother or something.
That afternoon, the judge ruled that Ed Gein was legally insane and therefore not competent to stand trial. He was sent off to live at Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane, a psychiatric hospital in central Wisconsin. For the people of Plainfield, life after Ed Gein would never be the same.
We never locked our doors before this happened. But we began to lock our doors. The 50s was an era of innocence, I believe, and it's pretty much ended that.
Still, there was one last piece of business for the town to attend to. On March 30th, 1958, Palm Sunday, Gein's farm and personal effects were scheduled to be auctioned off. But in the early morning hours of March 20th, residents awoke to a strange orange haze glowing a few miles out of town.
There will be an auction here Palm Sunday, but this house and the personal belongings of Ed Gein will be conspicuously absent. Call it an act of God or whatever you will. The main attraction will be missing, reduced to a mass of rubble by a mysterious fire.
News of the fire reached Gein himself later that morning.
I went to Ed's room and I told him that his house had burned down. And he made a gesture just as well, the exact words that he said.
In the end, after a brief investigation, the cause of the blaze remained a mystery. Residents of Plainfield were just happy the place was gone.
The people in Plainfield were so happy that this house burned down and this was going to go away. We weren't going to be bombarded by the media. We were not going to be having tourists come to Plainfield to see Ed Gein's horror house.
The auction of Ed Gein's estate still took place as scheduled on March 30th. Gein's grisly handiwork was not up for sale. All the human remains had been shipped off to the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. Yet that didn't stop hundreds of curiosity seekers from descending on the farm.
One of the things sold at the auction was Ed Gein's car, which a very enterprising carny type immediately purchased and started to take on tour.
Ed Gein's car used to show up at county fairs, like an exhibit, you know, like the two-headed cow or, you know, the bearded person, so that that would be an exhibit that you could put a tent around it and charge admission.
At Central State Hospital, staffers soon came to view Ed Gein as something of a model patient.
Ed was a quiet individual. He'd go and sit in the corner in the day room. And, we had some nice lounge chairs out there, and he'd read the paper there. He wouldn't converse too much with other patients. I can remember we used to play cribbage together out in the day room.
There were, however, times when Gein behaved oddly.
When it got, say, full moon, he would talk about women, what he'd like to do to them, and just ramble on and on. Just like very incoherent. And then as the full moon dissipated, he would get more back to normal. But he always had that glint in his eye that you kind of figured there was something there that was wrong.
In 1968, Gein's doctors wrote a letter to the court stating that Gein was now competent to stand trial for the murder of Bernice Warden.
When he walked into the courtroom, there was dead silence. It was just, I mean, you could hear a pin drop. And then he walked in and he stopped a little bit and he bowed his head to the audience.
After a 9-day trial, the judge found him guilty. The 62-year-old was sent back to Central State to live out the rest of his days. In time, Ed Gein's macabre fame would fade, yet his twisted saga would never lose its capacity to shock or its power to provoke our deepest fears. By the early 1970s, an aging Ed Gein was quietly passing his days in a Wisconsin mental institution.
He'd go to his room a lot and lay on the bed and kind of daydream. So I don't know what he was thinking about. I couldn't read his mind, but we always had the thought that he was thinking about what he had done.
Gein and his gruesome crimes had long since faded from the public consciousness. Yet the story of the so-called Mad Butcher of Plainfield had firmly taken root in the darkest reaches of the American psyche.
It was a time where he became almost unlifelike, almost like he was a creature of fiction, I think. Some type of a demigod almost.